This is the Riesel Historical Society on March 3rd, 2026, with Mr. David Wren and Miss Shaleigh Key. All right. So, have your thoughts of Riesel changed throughout the years?
Have the what?
Have your thoughts on Riesel and the town shaping to what it is today changed?
It's amazing the changes. It really is. And I think about the size of our school versus some of the schools that are closer to a big city. And when you consider like Liberty Hill that has 5A schools that's right outside of Austin, we're right outside of Waco, and yet it hasn't been that big an impact. So we've kind of been protected, and it's kind of cool, and we like it.
Yeah. Done so many accomplishments here, such as the Little League team. Which one would you say you're most proud of?
Wow. It as you go through and look at the accomplishments, I was so proud as a principal, as an administrator, the way we could highlight some of our really sharp kids. And, the coming out of a small class A school, sending as many kids to college as we did to make them as successful in the world as they are, doctors, attorneys, accountants, and it was I felt so much better than any kind of athletic event, or in my case an FFA leadership contest or something. The fact that we had our kids prepared for the next step in becoming great citizens, I think speaks a lot for our town.
Okay. So, speaking of being an FFA teacher, were you prepared to be the principal, or did that just kind of jump at you?
Absolutely not. And that was one of my, I guess, my game changers, because I wanted to see Riesel as a school on the top of the page, and made it my goal to try to win contests so that Riesel would be on the top of that page. As an ag teacher, I never got there. I was close in both winning a Houston livestock show and winning a state contest. Was tremendously successful and ended up being second place in both of those. Rocked my world. I went into some type of depression, to the point that when my superintendent walked in, I was afraid he was going to fire me. And he said, "I'm retiring. I'm moving the principal to the superintendent's office, and you come to the principal's office." And to think of I said, "Well, I don't deserve that. We couldn't win." And he said, "Yeah, but you dedicated yourself to that. And if you can do that with the school, you'll be so much better off. Riesel will be so much better off." And, going through the different tests that came along, there were times that we were on the top of the page with some of the very best schools in Texas. And that's pretty special. But getting back to your question, was I prepared for it? No, no way at all. I was supposed to graduate from A&M in 79, and my dad was pretty adamant that we were going to go through. And so when we started college, we worked summers at and his idea was, coming out of a small school, you can't go to a campus that big and survive. They'll send you home. But in the summer, there was just a very small percentage there. And so it became home, and it was okay that many thousands of people were there for the long term. So I graduated before Christmas in 78 and started here in January of 79. And exactly when that transaction happened was probably 7 years later, that I had been going through um, getting my principal's degree or secondary degree with a bunch of coaches, just because it was boring in Riesel, and being with them one night a week. We'd go to class and then go to George's, and I'd hear all the football stories and knew what all the coaches were doing. And before you know it, we were graduating. And so I never planned on using that, except that at that point in time, it was a pay raise. If you went from a bachelor's to the next step, there was a money increment that went with it. Shocked me that it I was being asked to use it, but it worked. So
It's pretty cool. It's actually really cool. So teaching is not only a gift to you, but Miss Wren and Coach Wren. Did you think that that would be passed on to your son?
we came from teachers. My dad was an ag teacher. My mom was a sixth grade teacher, and it just seemed like that's what we did. And the gift is when you see somebody that's a student when their eyes light up and they get it, because that means you were successful. And that's one of the things that was so hard when I left the classroom to go to the office, because in the office, basically at that time, everything that came to me was a problem. And when you're in the classroom, you get to see the success. You get to see the kids with that. I got it. And that's was so exciting. Um, when a kid comes in your office, why are you here? It's always a sad story. And but anyway, it took a long time to get used to it. It took a long time to try to turn that into something positive. Uh, and it's interesting now that there's been out of the business nearly as long as I was in the principal business. How many people will come up and that I don't even recognize faces anymore because they got facial hair and another 100 pounds. And do you remember me? You got to help. But thank you so much for what you did. So the I guess the rewards are still coming, and there's still those that I hate you, but for the same, for the most part, they avoid you. So it's all good. It's embarrassing. I'm getting to the point where I have to ask so often. I actually went into a therapy session um, earlier this week, and guy came up and said, "Mr. Ian, I'm Travis," and I said, Skinner, and he said, "Yeah, but I'm the good one." I said, "Yeah, I know, Clayton." Anyway, just those kind of things. It's fun that it still comes back around. And some people come home and build nice houses and fit into the community so well. It's so rewarding to see that happen.
Great. Do you remember how sports were back then and how competitive the school was?
It seems like everything bounces around athletics. And that was one of the things I really wanted to showcase because Riesel didn't always have success on the field or on the courts. And I was trying to remember if Cassie was a cheerleader when they went through the homecoming year. It seemed like everywhere Riesel went was somebody's homecoming. Do you remember that? It's just because you always get somebody for homecoming that you know you can beat. And so it was one of those years that we were hoping to have a victory, and you wanted to get out off the ball because basketball it couldn't be worse, and yet there it was again because you were in a gym 3 nights a week because at that point in time the principal was 7, 8 JV high school, and you were there every night turning out the lights after you took up money, and it was uh, it was fun. But again, we needed to showcase the how sharp Riesel kids were, not how athletically talented they were. Is that the right word? Because we could deal with intelligence at any level. We have some excellent kids here. Hope we still do, right?
I believe so.
Good.
Did you do a lot of UIL competitions with that?
UIL was not something that was, you've got to focus on certain things. we first started dealing with UIL when we had an English teacher from Mart come over, and she was instrumental on having Mart win UIL, and they excelled at it. And she couldn't understand why Riesel with their kids couldn't compete. And I said, it's not that we can't, we just don't know enough about competing. And it that's something that's kind of become attractive in the last few years. I know that uh, Miss Morgan has asked me to come up and be a judge, and it's such a wonderful thing to see that we are showcasing that, because we should have worked on it a lot longer than we have.
That's really interesting that it wasn't, big back then.
Well, and see, coming out of an FFA background, there was always contests that I was pushing. Um, Cassie, you probably remember about the time I got here, a band teacher had just retired, and she was some kind of icon. I mean, the whole world bounced around her band, and she was tremendous at it. And that was one of my goals as an ag teacher, was trying to get kids out of band so I could have the good ones over here to work with. And it was a chore, and maybe the reason that we weren't successful till I was in administration and moving those kids out of band into FFA. Sorry.
Pretty cool. Do you remember anything happening during that time with the town? Anything big happening in the town?
There's just so many things that when you are looking at history on how the changes in the town, um, little things. Like when I got here, there wasn't a policeman in
Really?
town. The whole town worked off of either constable from Mart or the county, and the number of battles that were fought on the square on the weekend were just, you come back to school Monday, and that's all the kids could talk about was this big fight. And so it was tremendous when we got a police officer that could keep that from going on. Um, Remembering the very first computer that was on campus was huge. Um, to go from that to thinking that everyone has a computer today, or is that school is handing them out, and the usage of that. And I think that's also one of the most scary things that we have to deal with in education today, is that it solves so many problems, but it presents so many more. Um, how useful these stinking phones are, and yet now they're prohibited in the classroom because of another thing. And reading some of the studies on what your generation has come up with, having a hard time making face-to-face contact, um, being able to type with one finger or a thumb, where when Cassie was here, we had a class that, uh, and you probably don't understand why the keyboard is designed the way it is. It's not important anymore, but the best keys were those that are on your best fingers. And so anyway, there's just little things like that have changed through the years. When I first came into the principal's office, there was a tax office next to me, and that got taken out and moved originally to Falls County, and then to McLennan County. And those little things like that don't make sense now, but were tremendously important at the time. Um, we had I can't remember there was one of those major dates. I was trying to remember if it was 100 years, 150 years, what it was, that and it was a big thing. I mean, we um, at that time had the baseball field where the new high school is, and had that all fixed up, and it it was a major deal. They had a tractor pull there or something, and it just. Uh, do you remember the building that was there, the uh, tabernacle?
So where we are sitting now, this was a baseball field back then, where we're sitting in our,
Really?
yes,
I didn't know
the
that.
high school is now, and there was a huge rock cement building for the Lions Club. There's a bandstand, there was a tabernacle.
All over here?
The bandstand is still there. The bandstand is still here, and this is where the fair was. Yes, the fair used to be right here, where the baseball field was every year.
So where was the high school before?
Right next, sort of next to where the administration building is now.
See, everything I dealt with is in a hole out there somewhere. They've pushed.
I had no idea.
I
I
parked
really
under an
thought
oak tree that's kind of stuck out there in the middle of the. And that's another thing I was thinking about when you're talking about changes. I left the key in that pickup every day under that same tree. Never worried about it. And there was even a time that I think there was a $20 bill on the dash. I never even rolled up the windows. Never considered it not being there when I came back.
And
And
if we'd have known that, I'm just kidding.
well, y'all were too busy worrying about when the drug dog came because there'd be a bullet in your pickup and you'd be in trouble. Because, there, I don't know. I may have been just completely ignorant on the drug issue, but it wasn't in existence that in the volume that, you hear about today. And it's, okay. One of the things that I've focused on lately is just because you asked me to do this. When we look at history, we study history to figure out how we've advanced. One of those questions was talking about um, the what was certain things like 50 years ago, segregation. Have we closed that gap, or have we accelerated it? Look at the difference in the gap between today's election day between politicians, Democrats and Republicans. That gap is so much further apart that it makes me think my generation failed. The fact that we're still asking the question about discrimination means that we were very unsuccessful. And that's something your generation is going to have to fix because we're throwing it to you because we couldn't do it. And good luck with it. We pray that you can fix it. But there's so many more gaps along the way. And not only now is it because in my world, there was black and there was white. Now you have so many more diverse cultures in the salad. It's there's just too much to deal with. And the when I took the first FFA team to Kansas City, there was a song on then that was sure could use a little good news today. Go back and read the words of it. That was at least 40 years ago. And, they're still fighting in Lebanon. They're still killing in the street. They're all the wars that are problems that we were dealing with there still exist. And it makes us wonder with all the technology and all the things that we have, why can't we cure cancer? Why is dementia more important now than that? Why am I having to deal with it? We should have fixed it with my grandparents, and it's still there. So I guess I don't need to get little things. Let's go to the little things. When I look at the Riesel Rustler, still here, right? When I was teaching and we were successful, not only did I put that kid's name in there, but I put their parents, and if their grandparents lived in Riesel, this is also the granddaughter, grandson of, because people want to know names. You look at a picture today and they can't print the names because of AI, and somebody's going to track and steal something from them if they know their name. It's no. we, we, we haven't closed the gap on a lot of things, and just so little. But anyway, go ahead. Yeah, I'll shut up.
Going back to diversity, Riesel is very diverse now.
Is.
The school is, we have everybody and we're all united. Was that how it was when you were teaching?
Well, there's always groups, and there's always mean girls, and there's always the athletes that pick on the nerds, and so. But that's another thing that when you're reading about how things are today, because I am apart from this for over 15 years, that they're blaming on your generation being so stuck on a computer or a phone that you're only talking to people that you get along with, and you avoid the other problems. The As an administrator, and this may be getting too psychological again, but the parents, you have to deal with parents to understand how the kids are thinking. And about the time I was leaving, there was a parent that was called an umbrella, that everything that their kid was under this protective umbrella. And so the child didn't have to worry about getting along in the world because mama made it work. The newest generation of mothers, parents, are called snowplows. They open the road that their kid follows without any obstructions. But back in my day, we left the house because we were kicked out of the house, go play. And you had to learn to get along with the bullies. You had to learn how to deal with other people. You had to learn how to go in the store and buy gum. You learned the whole process of how money worked, how you earn money. Uh, I don't know if y'all remember, but if you got a soda, you had to bring the bottle back for a nickel or whatever it was, and so many of those things that were just common in those days, your generation's been fenced away from, and it's not helped you because when I'm looking at scholarships trying to determine which are the best students from the different schools, and because of how they work their phones, there's no capitalization, there's no punctuation, there's just this run on stream, and you're thinking, my English teacher would have boxed my hand if I didn't do this and put so much red on it that some of the red would be blood. And yet, think, how can they let a student turn this in for a scholarship? But anyway, little things. I'm sorry. Ask your next question.
Actually doing essays in my class right now, and my English teacher is having us write them to administrators on a topic such as like changing the 4-day weekdays and having different lunches. And actually this is a big one, that juniors and seniors can leave for lunch. And I was wondering, could they do that back then?
That was one of my first real battles, is that we had a closed campus and it wasn't closed. And so that was one of my goals, that we'll close this campus. You're not leaving this campus. unless you had a note on file from your parents. And so the anyway, that you can't believe what a war that was. And yeah, so we won't go back and remember some of those nightmares, or that. Um, Paddling, there probably wasn't a day in my working 28 years that I didn't hit some kid with a board. And it seems so archaic and so scary. I still wait for Child Protective to come arrest me because I don't know what the statute of limitations are on that thing. But the, and it just, parents were so, whatever happens at school is going to happen at home. And I had to call the parents and tell them, but there's just, there's the number of times that, you can't spank my kids just didn't happen. And now it's just such an archaic idea. You cannot hit a kid and tell them not to hit. It's this psychological step, and I don't know. I don't have the answer for that one, but I just know that you have to be in line and in tune. And at that time, being in tune was to take care of kids with paddling. And um, I get frustrated. One of the things that I need to say is that it's important to know the attention span of a student. And this is one of the things that was so critical in my time as an administrator, because a teacher had to know when they lost a certain percentage of their class because they were no longer paying attention. And some of the teachers that had been here longer than my short period of time as a principal, when you say, do you realize that 4 or 5 of your kids are basically asleep or doodling on the top of their desk instead of listening to you? You've got to find a way to bring them back around. Oh no, that's not the way I teach. Well, you know what? It needs to be. And going from that to church and listening to a preacher and then looking around at the people that weren't listening anymore because they lost them, I guess shows the importance of, you've got to watch the attention of the people that you're trying to present an item to. If they're not there, you got to tell a joke. You got to throw something at them. You got to do something to get them back on track. And I hope that's being addressed today. I really do. It's so important in the overall picture.
Especially in my math class. Believe that. So Riesel, it's a very strong, small community, and you came here right after college?
I did. I came from a town that, in fact, a lot of the people in Riesel at that time, because so many of small town people tend to go back to their small town and like their roots. And like me, I didn't want to leave. So when I came to Riesel, it was so much like my hometown. And so many of the people that I was bumping into, we'd played football against. We were in the same district back in those days. And so when they would introduce, I remember your name from a scouting report, or something to that effect. And anyway, that was kind of a big thing when I first came here. When I first came here, this was a German town, quote unquote, on, in these, and so many of the elders still had that dialect and still used German. um, I'm trying to think of Octaliba or something like that. And instead of, oh my goodness, they were just little saying, you'd go, what?
That he still uses. It'll come to me.
But you don't hear that anymore. And I, it's like we're losing some identity. And I guess some of it's good. It shows that we have blended into I guess a better soup than a salad, is that's the right word in terminologies, but um, it is very diverse. I know that for the longest we were in the upper 80 percentages of being white, and it really hurt us because the state wanted this blend, and because we had a very the words you used was very close knit sector, that there wasn't room for other cultures, is that the right word, to fit in. And it, the number of people that would come and say, this ain't us, and go to a more diversified area. Or as you pointed out, if you had an athlete and you could go to Riesel or Mart, you might play more games if you went to Mart because they were in the playoffs, and that was almost a different idea for us back then. And anyway, I can remember when Texas went. This is another one of those things that is a pretty major, but it's not. School started after Labor Day. You didn't start school till September, but you had to get this amount of days in before the first semester. And if you tried to finish the first semester in time to have a Christmas break, you had to start before September 1st. And, you didn't get that 3-month break. And now it's what, almost early August? Am I understanding right? The different um, Six Flags, is that even a thing anymore? Schlitterbahn, those different had put so much money in to try to keep that last go around a holiday, because this is the amount of money we're going to lose in the major cities to tourism, that because the generation then were going to have their big splurge before they start school. And if you start school before that, it's just bizarre. You can't do it, and yet we did it. And you couldn't start after September, send kids home for the holidays, bring them back middle of January and have finals. I mean, that was even more bizarre, right? So uh, I remember, and I'm thinking of this because when we talk about diversity, um, one of the first years that we had school before Labor Day, we came up the Tuesday after we were off on that Monday, and my office was being burned. When they opened the door, it was opened enough air that all of the records, basically everything in my office, caught on fire. And you can't use water on paper and expect to keep it. So that particular year, I spent the first semester working out of the homemaking department, rebuilding permanent files, as well as doing my job. It was just one of those bizarre things. And the kid that did that, we had already had words and wars before Labor Day. I mean, it was that early. We clashed immediately. And I guess you could understand why he wasn't fitting in the schools before, and I was too stupid to understand how kids out of gangs out of cities worked. But I can remember that one of the times the kids in Riesel came in and said, "Don't worry, Mr. Wren, we'll take care of it." I'm like, "What? This is my problem." And they had a demonstration in that kid's yard, and that family had to leave Riesel. That was the kind of support that the kids had for the school. And I'm like, God, it's so neat. But I can't pat somebody on the back for vigilante, but it had its place. And I know that if that kid's still alive, he's in the pen because later shot a Baylor student. And it's one of those sad stories, but it's one of those things that you were asking about uh, different time. That was major. That having Mr. Urbanky retire and him being my only boss was major. That was a horrible year. Um, just the changes. We don't like change, and yet we've got to be successful with them. Anyway, I'll shut up again. What's your question? I was here during 9/11. We came to school, and I can remember being in my office and having the secretary bust in my office and say, "A plane hit a building in New York." And it was like, "So what's that got to do with anything?" And then as it unfolded and as you see it go by, that by 10 or 11 o'clock, pretty much there wasn't school going on. Everybody was just sitting around thinking, is this the end of the world? This is just, but by then there was multiple planes in multiple places and how many more. And it was just a horrible day. I know that there were sporting events that were canceled. And you cancel a sporting event in Texas in September when football's and that's major. And it took weeks to figure out exactly how big an impact it was because it just kept getting worse. They had different ways of hurting the people that were helping. It wasn't just a plane. It was, now the people that rushed into the building, now they were in danger. And uh, it was surely a bad time. Um, it's scary when you say, okay, we're going to go outside and look at the smoke to the north because our government has put enough pressure on a unit that they're burning a church down. Uh, Pretty traumatic. But those different events that happen like that, it's we mentioned COVID. How you deal with that? That was a very scary time to start with, and it got less. And I think people got just so tired of the whole thing. I know that my generation had parents that were in different facilities that they couldn't go see. I can remember taking a test, putting on a mask, putting on plastic suits, and going in just to be able to see her for a few minutes before I got run out. And they were it's just traumatic, horrible. Or people that were in the hospital and their loved ones would be in their car outside because they couldn't go in. And but anyway, those there are. I was trying to remember, when we had a winter that there were like 28 days that it didn't get above freezing. Do you remember that? Our our Riesel water well froze, and the National Guard had trucks that were going and would run down the road real slow, and you could run outside with your uh, thermos and get water. And if you knew a family member or a good friend that's in the neighboring town, you got to go take a shower at night. Otherwise, it was, and I remember the school had, T-shirts instead of, we made the playoffs. It's we survived 28 days of freezing or something like. Anyway, it was uh, one of those funny situations in Riesel, right? Uh, but getting back, I was thinking about that because from the moment that I got here, Riesel has had issues with water. They had a well that was right downtown. It's still where the water plant is now, I think, somewhere right in that area. And Cassie, you might remember this in the summer when it got hot. The water was so hot you had to let people turned off their hot water heaters, and that was the cold water. And if you had a shirt the color of you ladies, it'd be rusty color coming out of the washer because of the amount of iron that was in that water. Um, do you remember the fluoride in teeth? The
Well water out in Perry, but
it
it was in Riesel too.
it was in Riesel too, and because I kept thinking, why is that child's teeth mottled? It did something to the teeth, and then. But anyway, I worked with a water board for over 15 years, and finally, we weren't successful on that. We drilled new wells, and we still have arsenic as a problem, and still looking for ways. And at that point, we were trying to use Brazos River shallow wells, and they finally got that approved because Brazos River Authority controlled that water. And looks like we're going to get a new well dug out there and bring a pipeline from the river to right near where I live is where the new well is, and try to blend that. It might come right across y'all, not right in front of you. You've seen those little ribbons in the road, hadn't you? That's what that is. So maybe after 50 years, we're going to get our water taken care of. Anyway, we'll see if they can get it done.
School people are always talking about the water and how it tastes different.
It does.
So interesting that's happening. Did not know that was what that was for.
We'll see if they can get it done. It sounds like it's very positive though. And the I guess it's the chemical. It was a power plant back in our day. It's a chemical company now, and they're going to provide some acreage that they can put that well in and bring this water to blend, and hopefully everything works out. We'll see how that goes.
So us as a community, we're pretty close. So how would you compare that to somewhere else that
It's funny to me when you look at Riesel, and I am just outside of the city limits, so I can look at it. Number one, I don't know where else I would like to live. I mean, it's that good. But when you look at the politics of a small town, it so mirrors all the other little towns or large towns. Riesel focuses on the school. Everything is, we're a bedroom community because nobody can work in Riesel because there's not any business here, and unless you start your own business or something. And um, so we're out of the problems of the city, but we bring them here. If you look at little league sports, there's always a coach and a mom or the whole, there's always these little wars. Um, do we have the right policeman? Do, can we do this? Is this board member's an idiot. We got to get them taken care of so we can do this. It's, but it's very much like family. As much as we fight and disagree, you're right. There's a glue, a togetherness, and a family feel that hopefully we can keep the respect for one another, even though we don't always have the same ideas. I worry so much about how important today is about year-round sports. When you look at kids, there's almost two philosophies. I don't want my kid to be involved in a sport every Saturday of the 50 plus weeks of the year. But if I don't, he's not going to compete because there's others that are. So we have to be a part of this group and we have to be able to contend. We have to go to the little league and then we have to go to a basketball league and then we have to go to football league and for a grandparent that has to be in a gym or a field every Saturday to support his kid, it's just like, no, let's go fish. You know what? And I honestly think that one of the biggest enemies in America today is there's not enough time to do all the things that we want to do. And prioritizing is so difficult because anyway, again, what's your next question? Isn't that cool?
Was that not a thing?
To think that there would be a woman on the city council or on the school board was almost unthinkable to the point where if they ran, it was almost a joke. Keep running, that kind of thing. And all of a sudden it's like, hey, this isn't so bad. They and I it's just a smart move. I mean, it's and maybe because men got lazy and didn't want to do the job, it opened that door. But what a wonderful door to open. So, um, yeah, I understand there's 6 of the 7 are women now on the school board. How wonderful. That's cool.
Sugar until you retired.
Okay. For you to graduate, you had to pass a test, correct? What was the name of that test?
I think they called them tax tests, but we called them star tests.
Okay, so let's go with STAR, and that's the state of Texas, something, I don't know. When I started, it was up to our teachers to teach the skills that they felt like the kids need for graduation. Soon after I started, there was something that was called TABS, Texas Assessment of Basic Skills. And when that came out, it didn't bother us one little bit because our curriculum knocked the top out of that. We had no problems being in the 90 percentile in every level from where they started in the 3rd grade through, I think they quit at the junior level. And then they improved on that because it kept changing. And at one point, it was teams. Uh, Texas Ascension. Anyway, I can't even remember the acronym for it. And it went from that all the way to the point of, we're not doing as good on that test as we used to. We better start teaching the test. And that was a whole new idea. And and I think it went from that to Texas assessment of the K was knowledge.
And then parents, and then.
Yeah. At some point it was stars, but anyway, and I think that when with stars, if you can't meet this minimum, you can't get your diploma. And so, man, that put a whole new, so it kept trying to improve, and I'm not sure they ever improved. I really don't. When I know that there were several points that out of a class of 22 that we had 11 students go to A&M that year. And that wasn't all of them because we still had those other minor schools like UT and Baylor took some of those. And it was just so wonderful to think that little old Riesel had a graduating class that way over 50% went to a major university. And it was so easy for a student in Riesel to start out at MCC and have no problem with that because it's cheaper, it's home. Financially, you could, if you did it right, you could use that as a stepping stone to any college. And it was just so unique in how that worked. And then all of a sudden, wait a minute, that's not good enough. We've got to pass this test so that we can give them a diploma so they could do that. And it just seems so wrong. Um, I don't know where we are on stars or where we are on that test, but um, I know I felt like if I had been in administration a few years ago with the scores that I was reading in the paper, if I'd have been in administration, Riesel would not have accepted that and I'd have been fired. And I know our kids are still smart and I know they're still learning. And I think how unfair for this test to carry that much weight. But anyway, that's one of those things. Another thing that as an administrator that we have to look at differently is homeschooling. Um, when I read a few years ago that the major universities were recruiting homeschooled children that made above a certain score on the college entrance, I thought, wow, that's that's genius. Because in my day, if I had a problem with a student and with their learning capability, and it got to a point that we weren't playing pretty again, the parent would pull them out and went homeschool. And that was just almost at that point a sign of disaster because there wasn't enough support in a small school like Riesel to support those kids. And I know that I don't know where we are now, uh, but I do know that when people vote, a voucher would have never passed, but it did pass for student choice. So somebody's going to have to explain the difference in those two terms. And I've been waiting for the hammer to fall, and I don't know that they've explained it enough, and I can't keep up with enough information to know how that's affected Riesel, um, Marlin, the schools. I just don't know it because it's just like, okay, it voted, it passed, and it's gone away. I don't know. Did they hand you a ticket and say, here, go to Riesel, hand this to them, or you got your choice of going to Waco High, or I don't know. I don't know how that works. I've tried to find out, and it's pretty well kept secret. And those politicians that got it pushed through are still running on the top of the page, I guess. And I don't know, but the changes there are pretty spooky for somebody that doesn't like change.
We actually have a good bit of students that are homeschooled now from Riesel. So It's definitely ends up big change.
So the question that I have as far as homeschooling is a parent being paid to educate their child because they chose to use their voucher there?
Alright.
So let me ask you this. In hearing from our past history, where we've come from and the improvements that we've made, your generation has work to do. Do you understand what an old coot redneck like me is asking? Can y'all close the gap? Can y'all bring America back together? Can you bring Riesel back to the same town it was back when the biggest war we had was on the square on Saturday night? Uh,
Do because of the changes that's bigger than Riesel in itself. So like diversity and bringing that back, and that we are diverse as a school, and so we have fixed that a lot. But as a teaching and focusing on extracurriculars versus just in the classroom, I think that we should focus more on learning and then sports, not sports to learning. And the town, it has changed a lot. I didn't know a lot of things. Like, I didn't know that the high school was not here. I have thought that it was here the whole time. So, for the town to change that much is crazy to me. That's absolutely crazy. So, I mean, I really thought that this was a school the whole time, that they just like fixed it.
and I guess it's so crazy because we had in that campus, when I first became a principal, I was K through 12. And I replaced the head football coach, the athletic director, and the principal. So my job was a third of what his was. And when you think of now and it was a major step when a gentleman named Mr. Foster passed away and left us the property across the road. And when we chose to build the elementary there, we named it after him. That was Mr. Foster, and he had a weird nickname. Do you remember what his? Anyway, uh, some of his descendants was the second grade teacher. Well, she married into that family, but was here and another one of those icons, and probably why, as a principal, uh, we could function at that level because we had a first grade teacher and a second grade teacher that took care of their end of the hall and didn't want me down there. And one of those ladies had the Board of Education, the other one had the little red paddle. And I got one of those two when they retired. I couldn't get the little red paddle, but um, yeah, it was a thing. But to think now that there's three different principals and assistant principals and assistant superintendents, and back in my day, there was just the three of us, Mr. Hafe, Mr. Urbanky, and bless my little pointed head, I tried to stand in there with them, and it was. Do you remember Coach Harbor? We got Mr. Urbanky went to Baylor on a scholarship, on a track scholarship, and his coach called and said, "Hey, I got a kid that didn't quite make the Olympics, and he's going to be a fantastic coach. Could y'all take him?" We probably can't afford him. Yeah, you can afford him because he's got a Nike scholarship. And so he came out and was assistant coach, making more money from Nike than we had to pay our entire coaching staff. Probably, I don't know what that was. But, and Coach Harbor's still a fantastic guy. When his coach retired, he left Riesel to go back and coach at Baylor and retired and went home. And a few years ago, I got a request from a school down there. They wanted me to recommend him for a junior high coaching job. And I thought, how unreal. You can't look at a guy that coached in the Big 12. It wasn't, and yet you got to find out if he's good enough. But one of my proudest moments are the class of teachers that we were able to bring in. We really worked hard. And it's funny thing is if you got good teachers, you just need to let them teach and get out of their way. And we had some awfully good teachers. And when people talk about wish it was like, and no, it wasn't like me. It was like who we had there in our team. And I think that's one of the major things that sports does teach is how to get along. You've got to play pretty with the people around you, or you don't win. And I think if you can get a team of teachers, I think it all works. And that's one of the things that Riesel has been blessed with is good people, and then they have good kids, and it keeps coming on. It's been a joy. I guess we're at the end of your list, huh?
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for asking me. I know that y'all did this with Mr. Urbank, and I talked to him about it, and we had to kick around old ideas because back in our day, it was right after one of the days that Riesel had released for a bad weather day. And back in our day, bad weather days started at about 4 o'clock, driving the back roads to see if they were slick enough to call school or not. And we would announce it to the 3 radio and TV stations in Waco. It never happened the day in advance. And if we had school, that meant when we got in off those driving the back roads, we had to go crank diesel buses and try to heat them up enough so that when they picked up Cassie, she wouldn't freeze on the way to school. And just the different things that you think about that have changed. To think that you would make that call the night before and then have it wake up and it's not even freezing and you have a bad weather day would have been disastrous. Fall festival and senior trips were huge. And I can remember that we were setting up for the seniors always had bingo. And we were setting up and a federal marshal came in and said, we understand that there's going to be a bingo game here. Yes, sir. They're setting out all the prizes and this is, well, who's in charge? We need to arrest him right now. Because bingo's a pretty big thing. You got to have permits from ATF and all that kind of stuff, at least then. And, well, guess what? We're not going to play bingo tonight. And just little things that you just never expect. I probably have cooked thousands of hamburgers on Thursday night because you started 7th grade football at about 5 o'clock and parents had come rolling in. And if you had a good barbecue pit and smoke, they came straight to it and would get a burger and sit and watch their kids because they didn't have time. And the health department found out about it. And the number of things that we were doing wrong, we couldn't sell hamburgers. It was so great. And I guess that, along the way, those senior barbecues are just about a thing of the past because of health issues. And we didn't leave too many fingers in the sliced barbecue. And, I surely we had, did y'all have senior barbecue? We had Mama Lou that made potato salad and
You have to get in there with both arms.
both arms. And Mr. Erbanky, we call him Uri Banky beans because he made the beans. And usually there was 2 or 3 in every class that dad could use that pit down there that's still down there. And we would make enough money through the years to send did you go skiing?
Skiing.
And
And there are plenty of my classmates. That was their probably first and only ski trip. And they were skiing out there in their Letterman jackets and their jeans. So,
maybe the first time on a plane.
yeah, probably the first time on the plane.
And I can remember going through my little speeches on them. I said, when you get off the plane in Colorado, it could be climbing down a ladder, walking across a runway. So you better not be in flip flops and shorts if the blizzards, and how many times it caught them. And the reason I knew that is the first time I was caught. And I thought, we're fixing to have to get on a bus and ride for an hour from the airport I got to go get my coat. And so I went around and the guy said, no, we've already sent that one. It's over there. They're loading them, putting them on a bus. And so I hot footed across there and was standing there watching, looking for my suitcase. And one of the guys came up and said, don't just stand there. I said, what? He said, put the luggage where they're supposed to go. I said, how do I know where they're supposed to go? Well, that's red, that's orange, that, okay. And so anyway, I was throwing luggage up till I saw mine and I grabbed it, unzipped it, grabbed my coat and said, I quit. Put on my coat and walked away. But I can't imagine the pressure that it was just one of those things. But can you imagine a sponsor going with 20 or 30 18-year-olds anywhere out of state on the disasters that we lived through? Just and that's what I was going to say is that I had a lot of that stuff written down, and it was one of the things that got burned in my office. I lost all those memories. And I guess I'm just too lazy to rewrite them. But
There's still time.
I don't know. What's your name?
Auto-